Hi, this is Kirby. Today is, I think it's Tuesday. Yes, it's Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. And basically, this is an update. It's an update on what's happening in the Sean Diddy Combs case because I did upload for a minute an update yesterday, which then I removed. I know that I have a question pending somewhere in my comment section and in some of my podcasts. I don't know which one, um, asking why I removed it. Well, I will be answering that. The second topic I'm going to be discussing is the manner in which I have been deep diving into Michael Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, who incidentally has been mentioned by the attorneys of Sean Combs as it pertains to their ongoing quest to get Diddy bailed out of jail, and how that research and my new series, Weird Scenes in Liverpool, regarding the Beatles basically led me straight into not just the Beatles, but the music industry and some dots that I've connected, that I've uploaded previews of that before. And then the strange appearance in my research of Marina Abramović. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I didn't double check. But you know who she is. I use her in the cover photo for this podcast and her connection to the Beatles and frankly to a lot of the sort of odd stuff that we have been seeing, um, which just sort of cropped up in the Sean Combs case. There is a photo that has sort of been spread around the internet of one of his parties, and there is a female on a table in very much the same manner as a Rothschild surrealist party of 1972. I'm sure you can pull that photo up. Just put 1972 Rothschild surrealist photo, and you'll see that. And then, I had uploaded that as a freebie to my Substack. But the girl who is in the photo has stepped forward. I posted on X a link to her first two interviews, which I urge you to listen to. In any event, we know that Marina, as an artist, has done this type of, I'm going to use quotes for this, art before. But we're going to start with just a quick preview of what happened in the Sean Combs continuation, which began on Friday the 22nd with his request for bail. Now, I think it's like a 13 or 14 page document that the federal prosecutors submitted to the court, as well as the rebuttal by Diddy and his team. And by the way, what's interesting to me is that the survivor, and very few people survive what this girl went through. And she was a preteen at the time that certain things happened to her, is that she mentions the attorney, one of the attorneys who was representing Sean Combs, which, at this point, having seen, and I'm not going to mention their names at this point, but having seen and understand, having a better understanding into the attorneys who represented the epi victims, right? Then we should not be surprised to find that there was some interesting or odd behavior. I think odd is a much better word, regarding one of the attorneys who is alleged to have participated, and you know what that means. So in any event, it's the United States versus Combs, and this letter was submitted yesterday. And again, it's a long letter. I'm just going to read briefly the topics that they submitted before the judge. Before I get started, like the podcast, subscribe, because this is where I put my updates and a ton of other information. Okay, so dear Judge, the government respectfully submits this letter in further opposition of the defendant's renewed application for bail and following the November 22nd, 2024 bail hearing in the above captioned matter. At the hearing, the court requested that the parties address whether the defendant's conduct constituted obstruction for purposes of the Bail Reform Act. In addition, the court ordered the parties to address whether the defendant's conduct violated the court's October 25th, 2024 order and Local Criminal Rule 23.1, and what that communication the defendant would probably be able to engage in on a perspective basis. So, and then they cite, November 22nd, 2024, the trial at 62, because the court documents, as you probably are already familiar, there are many paragraphs and these paragraphs contain numbers. So for the reasons set forth below, the defendant's conduct, both past and present, constitutes obstruction, and his recent efforts to influence the jury pool are in violation of Local Criminal Rule 23.1 and in contempt of the very order incorporating that rule that this defendant demanded. The defendant's arguments that any of this conduct is protected by the First Amendment are similarly baseless. Moreover, as detailed in prior hearings and briefly addressed below, the defendant's history of obstructive conduct is part and parcel to his decades-long pattern of violence, which must be considered along with his obstructive conduct to fully address his dangerousness under the Bail Reform Act. A holistic view of his obstructive and violent conduct that is still happening presently, makes clear there is no way to rebut the applicable presumption of detention in this case. The bail package presented by the defendant does not come close to ensuring the safety of the community, including from the defendant's ongoing efforts to obstruct the case, nor does it adequately protect from risk of flight. For all these reasons, the defendant's renewed application for bail must be denied. So that is the documentation. That is sort of a summary of this very long, very itemized letter sent to oppose the judge granting Sean Combs bail. Now, this will probably be replied to maybe later today or tomorrow, and because it's the holiday weekend, who knows? Maybe it'll carry on until next week, but I'm keeping an eye on it and I will keep you guys posted. So what I posted yesterday was sort of a much shorter summary, which did not include the details. And so I took it down. All right. So then I think a lot of you here do follow me on Substack, and you have been reading my new series, Weird Scenes Inside Liverpool. So what we've learned, all of us, including newbies, right? Newbies to the world of, let's just call it what we have been studying, that someone like, let's say, Sean Combs was intentionally turned into a celebrity, a music mogul, by powers above him. In Sean Combs' case, we can point to Clive Davis and others of his ilk. And then, of course, when we look at Clive Davis, you can go a step above that. And I've got plenty of information, I think, on all of my platforms, Patreon, X, Substack, making it very clear what Clive Davis has done and who and what agency he's connected to. So that this did not begin with Sean Combs. So that when somehow I slipped in through an open door while, well, I guess the door wasn't really open, but I kicked it in when I found a connection between Mike Jeffries, again, who worked as a CEO for a company owned by the Wexner person, who was connected to the other one that we have spoken about endlessly, having something to do with the most famous group of all time, the Beatles. I knew that that was a rabbit hole worth going into. I could not understand when I first saw this link, this little opening that nobody had traveled into, that, it had to have some connection to us in present day and to what's going on, let's say, with Sean Combs having been created. So and by the way, the information I'm about to present to you was not, I didn't make the connections. I'm going to tell you who made that connection and what's going on. I did, however, make the connection of Robert Maxwell having been involved with the Beatles and a very important person that was close to them and other, let's call them, the same kind of investigations. It begins with a T, I'm going to spell this, Trafficking rings that were happening in Liverpool, in London, basically, that basically also included connections to uh, royal members of, royals. So we keep having generations of royals involved. And so that one connected to royals. But Robert Maxwell, I found some interesting connections that do connect him to the Beatles in the 1960s and to some other things, which I alluded to in my previous preview and which I wrote about in part 4. However, in the part before this, I mentioned that, yeah, the Beatles were a construct, and that according to Dr. John Coleman, who is a former British intelligence officer, okay, and who wrote a book called The Committee of 300, that it was his understanding based on his knowledge, and you can pull up his great speech about the Committee of 300. A lot of what he has said has been proven to be true. He claims that the German-born Theodor Adorno of the Tavistock Institute was the brains behind the creation of the Beatles. So that I understand that it's not something everyone wants to believe, that we were duped or the public was duped into accepting the Beatles as though it was a happenstance situation. It wasn't. I mean, neither was Sean Combs, right? So we're beginning, the patterns are there. I did happen, I know that, for example, one of my favorite people on the planet, and I think I've made it clear, I adore Professor Hamamoto. He's one of my favorite people, but I know he has a fondness for the Beatles. And he made a comment on his latest podcast saying, oh, well, this Adorno thing, it's not true, blah, blah, blah. And I will respectfully accept that, it's fine. He has a different opinion, but that doesn't negate that this very well happened. And by the way, I stumbled upon what's possibly the only photograph of the Beatles with Adorno. Okay, so I have a photograph that I will include in part 5. of the Beatles, where basically I'm also going to include the fact that Marina Abramović, who was involved with Tony, Podesta, who was equated with, you know, all that other stuff, and the ritual dinners that are very similar to what Sean Combs, that photo that's been floating around, and the girl, the victim who has survived and is talking about it. And she has in fact made lifelike cakes of celebrities like Debbie Harry and other people eating it, which is sort of like a representation of what you can well imagine. And I'm going to leave it blank, blank, blank. Okay. So, I mean, there are some ritualistic things and events that keep occurring. This How many coincidences can we have, folks? How many coincidences can we have? So I do in part five, I will be letting my readers on Substack, and I know many of you are here, know how Marina is connected to the Beatles and how other things, there are just a lot of mysteries. And I wasn't expecting to be so suddenly obsessed in a way with the Beatles. But here's the thing. When I had my original Kirby Summers Twitter account, there was a website that I had stumbled upon where you can put in your Twitter handle and it let you know who your top followers were. Now, I don't live far away from Yoko Ono. I just don't. But when I put it into the thing, Yoko Ono came up as the person, number one person following my account. Now, a lot of Hollywood celebrities were also following my account. People like Alec Baldwin, and really the list goes on and on. And when I had time to sort of start looking at connections to the person that we've spoken about that was arrested in 2019, I was like, oh, okay, that person is connected to that world. He or she is in a black book, but I was still puzzled because I have seen um, Yoko Ono many times. We live in the same neighborhood. She still lives at the Dakota. She has an apartment there. It's where she and John Lennon lived for many years, commencing in 1973. And so I was really surprised, and I thought that it had to do with the three-letter agency as it pertained to other things regarding John Lennon. But now that I have been putting some pieces together from what I believe to be credible sources, including books confirmed by the Beatles themselves, uh, and other things, and I share receipts in my work. I think that because of the fact that I too am a survivor of one of the billionaires in this group, I think now that her reason for being interested in what I was communicating to you guys, and at the time on what was then Twitter, I did not know that it was sort of like a censored situation. So I was pretty open and I would write these very long tweets, with threads and so, but she was the number one. If you want to know who was the second person following, it was Bradley Edwards, and it took it took me a while to figure out why. In any event, I wanted to sort of bring this stuff to your attention. You know, I do appreciate the fact that you guys are liking the uploads, and I welcome all the new subscribers. It's like when somebody like me who has been struggling for decades to get my voice heard, and not only am I getting my voice heard, but through my writings and my book The Billionaire's Woman, where I go into detail about how I was ensnared into this world. But I became before the arrest of the EP person in July of 2019, I needed to get some answers. So initially my work in, let's say, dot connecting or going down rabbit holes began as a result of some ongoing threats against me. And I wanted to know, well, why? And I didn't understand for many, many years that it was connected to layers that we're now seeing exposed via the Sean Combs case and the case that preceded that, which we have been discussing. That said, this week is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Um, Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your ongoing support. I know that the other side is here listening too. That's okay. And by the way, it's okay to have uh to sort of like push back when one of your celebrity heroes, or and I like the music of the Beatles, and I like music of people that are now known to have been involved in horrifying situations. However, what I have learned is I'm removing my any kind of like hero worship. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be like, let's call it hyper focused on a particular person and allow my feelings to get involved when I come across the stark reality, which is hard. I know it's very hard for some people to swallow. That said, thank you again. Give this a like. Have a good day. Bye.